In the heart of a bustling corporate gala, a quiet tension filled the room. A little girl stood on tiptoe, staring at the polished chessboard that had been set up as nothing more than decoration. Her father, a single dad working as the event's janitor, to stop her, terrified of the humiliation that might follow. After all, what chance did a child like her have in front of wealthy executives and their watchful eyes? But when her tiny hands made the very first move, the room froze. Even the CEO, a man hardened by years of ruthless business, found his eyes welling with tears. The gala was meant to be a celebration of power and prestige. Inside the grand ballroom, chandeliers glistened over rows of tables dressed in white silk, and the air buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and whispered business deals. At the far end, a polished chessboard sat on display, its pieces carved from ivory and ebony, a symbol of intellect and strategy for the powerful men and women in attendance. No one paid much attention to the man in the corner. His name was Daniel, a single father who worked long hours as a janitor to keep his daughter fed and safe. He wasn't dressed in fine suits or polished shoes. His uniform was simple, his hands rough from scrubbing floors. What made him stand out wasn't his appearance, but the little girl who clung to his side. Her name was Lily, bright-eyed, curious, and brimming with a quiet confidence. She often accompanied her father when he couldn't afford childcare to the wealthy guests. They were invisible, just part of the background. But Lily's eyes sparkled when she spotted the chessboard. She tugged at her father's sleeve, whispering with eagerness, her gaze fixed on the carefully aligned pieces. Daniel shook his head, worry gnawing at him. This wasn't their world. These weren't their games. He had seen enough mockery in his life to know how cruel people could be. Yet Lily was insistent. The board called to her, not as a display, but as a challenge. And though her father tried to hold her back, fate had already begun to weave its threads. Because the moment she placed her tiny hand on a pawn, the room's attention shifted. Nothing would ever be the same again. The room fell into an uneasy silence as Lily's small fingers touched the pawn. Conversations paused, and eyes turned toward the child and her father. At first, it was amusement that rippled through the crowd, soft chuckles from men in tailored suits, whispers from women dripping with diamonds. A janitor's daughter daring to touch something meant only for the elite. It was unthinkable. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to pull Lily away, to apologize, to slip back into the shadows where no one would notice them. But before he could move, an imposing man in a sharp black suit stepped forward. He was introduced as Victor Hale, the CEO of a powerful corporation and a patron of the gala. His presence alone demanded attention. His eyes sharp as he studied Lily with an expression that hovered between curiosity and disdain. Victor asked whose child this was. And when Daniel stepped forward, shame burning his cheeks, the laughter grew louder. Guests muttered about boundaries and knowing one's place. Someone sneered that chess was a game for minds of power and privilege, not the children of men who cleaned floors. Daniel felt every word like a dagger, and for a moment he wished he could simply vanish. But Lily didn't flinch. She sat on the edge of the chair, her gaze fixed on the board, as though she saw something no one else could. Her small hand pushed the pawn forward with quiet certainty, the very first move of the game. Gasps filled the room. The boldness of it made people lean closer. Victor smirked, intrigued. Against the expectations of the room, he accepted her unspoken challenge and sat down across from her. The guests circled, their curiosity now tinged with cruelty. They didn't expect a contest. They expected a spectacle, a chance to laugh at a child's foolishness and her father's humiliation. Daniel's hands trembled at his sides. He wanted to stop this before it went too far, to shield Lily from the ridicule he knew was coming. But something in her eyes held him still. Her confidence was unshaken, her focus unbreakable as the pieces began to move, her knight leaping unexpectedly, her bishop cutting sharp lines across the board. Murmurs of amusement began to shift into murmurs of surprise. The child wasn't moving pieces at random. She was thinking ahead, weaving strategies with a clarity that unsettled even the confident CEO. Still, the whispers of disdain lingered around Daniel like smoke. People muttered about how absurd it was to let a janitor's kid embarrass herself in front of the wealthy elite. They expected failure, and more than that, they wanted it. Because, to them, allowing a child like Lily to succeed Evan in a game was an insult to the order they had built their lives upon. The tension grew with every move. Daniel could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on him. The cruel eyes that reminded him of every barrier he had ever faced as a man of color in a world that never let him forget his place. Yet, as he looked at Lily, determination etched on her young face, he realized that this wasn't just a game of chess. It was something far greater. The pieces on the board had become symbols. Every move Lily made was a defiance of expectation. Every capture a quiet rebellion against the walls of privilege and prejudice surrounding them. And the closer she pushed Victor into a corner, the more the room began to shift from laughter to silence. The board was nearly full. Yet the silence in the room was deafening. What had begun as a cruel joke was turning into something no one could have predicted. Victor Hale, the wealthy CEO who had built an empire on power and intimidation, was now leaning forward, beads of sweat forming at his temple. Across from him sat Lily, barely tall enough for her chin to hover above the table, her eyes steady, her breath calm. Each of her moves tightened the noose around his king. The crowd, once eager to laugh, now stood in stunned disbelief. A janitor's daughter couldn't possibly be doing this, they thought, and yet she was. Daniel stood frozen, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. For years, he had accepted the invisible chains placed on him, cleaning offices where no one saw him, walking streets where people crossed to the other side. But in that moment, as he watched his daughter outthank one of the most powerful men in the city, he felt something stir inside him. Victor's jaw clenched as his queen was taken, the gasps of the crowd echoing like thunder. This wasn't just a loss of a piece, it was a humiliation in front of his peers. He tried to intimidate, tried to lean in with an air of superiority, but Lily didn't blink. She moved her rook with the precision of someone who saw 10 steps ahead. The room leaned closer, the suspense unbearable. And then it happened. Lily slid her piece across the board, her voice barely a whisper as she looked up at the man across from her. Checkmate. The room erupted in chaos. Gasps, murmurs, and disbelief crashed like a wave against the silence that had built for so long. The powerful CEO sat back in shock, defeated not by another titan of industry, but by the daughter of a janitor child no one believed deserved to sit at that table. Daniel's eyes burned with tears. In that moment, he wasn't just a janitor. He was the father of a champion. A man who realized that the chains of prejudice could be broken, not with anger, but with brilliance and courage, and for the first time in years. The crowd was forced to see them not as invisible, not as less than, but as equals who demanded respect. The room stayed frozen for a long moment, as though time itself was struggling to catch up with what had just happened. Victor Hale, a man whose arrogance had never been challenged, slowly leaned back in his chair, his face pale with disbelief. His empire of influence meant nothing in that moment. He had been undone by an innocent girl who saw the board not with fear, but with clarity. Daniel, still trembling, felt every eye in the room shift toward him. For years, those eyes had looked through him, barely acknowledging the janitor who cleaned their offices, swept their halls, and vanished into the background. But tonight, those same eyes saw something different. They saw a man whose daughter had shattered the ceiling of prejudice with one quiet move. The silence broke not with laughter or mockery, but with hesitant applause. It began at the back of the room, a single pair of hands clapping, then spread until the entire hall filled with the sound. Daniel blinked back tears as he held Lily's small hand, his heart swelling with pride. She had not just played a game, she had rewritten the story of who they were allowed to be. Victor shifted uncomfortably, his polished image cracking under the weight of humility. For the first time, he looked at Daniel not as someone beneath him, but as a man whose worth could not be measured by his uniform. And he looked at Lily not as a child out of place, but as a mind far beyond her years. The humiliation had humbled him and, maybe, just maybe, changed him as the crowd dispersed. Daniel and Lily walked out together. The night air was cool, carrying a sense of freedom Daniel had never felt before. Lily skipped along the sidewalk, humming a tune, while Daniel's mind swirled with thoughts. For too long, society had written them off as invisible, unworthy of a seat at the table. But tonight proved something undeniable. Dignity is not granted by wealth, nor erased by prejudice. It lives within, waiting for the right moment to shine. In the days that followed, whispers of the match spread like wildfire. Not about the CEO's defeat, but about the little girl who outsmarted him. It was a story retold in offices, in classrooms, and across kitchen tables. Reminder that brilliance can come from the most unexpected. Places. Neil knew their struggles weren't over. Racism, classism, and judgment would still follow them in many forms. But now, they carried something stronger than fear. They carried proof. Proof that they were more than society's labels. Proof that no barrier could contain the human spirit when given the chance to rise. And so, the story leaves us with a question. How many other invisible people walk among us, carrying brilliance the world refuses to see? And what might happen if, just once, we gave them the chance to make their move?